of South Carolina, this is Science Never Sleeps, a show that explores the science, the people, and the stories behind the scenes of biomedical research happening at MUSC. I'm your host, Gwen Bushy. For nearly 100 years, science fiction stories have been giving us an idea of what living with artificial intelligence might be like. But we don't have to look to our favorite sci-fi to see artificial intelligence, also called AI, in action. It's already making an impact in our everyday lives, whether we realize it or not. When you ask Alexa or Siri a question, unlock your phone using face recognition, or get a notice from your bank about possible fraudulent activity on your account, AI is working in the background to offer us an opportunity or information that we didn't have before. AI uses computers and machines to solve problems and make decisions in the same way human minds do, faster and often with more accuracy. This offers incredible opportunities in biomedicine, where AI can not only help us understand more about how the human body works, it can help us discover the best ways to treat patients, leading to better outcomes. Our guests in this episode are researchers in this exciting biomedical engineering space and are using AI in their work to improve lives. Dr. Hai Yao is a professor of oral health sciences in the College of Dental Medicine at the Medical University of South Carolina and is the Associate Department Chair for the Clemson MUSC Bioengineering Program. He also serves as the Ernest R. Norville Endowed Chair and Professor of Bioengineering at Clemson University. His research studies temporomandibular joint function and disorders, also called TMJ, and why risk factors for this issue impact treatment and prevention. The TMJ makes it possible to move the lower jaw, which is important for eating and speaking. Shunshin Sun is a senior PhD engineering student in Dr. Yao's lab studying machine learning and biomechanics. Stay with us. Dr. Yao and Shunshin, thank you so much for joining me on Science Never Sleeps.
Thank you, Gwen, and we're happy to be here.
It's great to be here.
So in our intro, we talked very briefly about what artificial intelligence or AI is, but Dr. Yao, how would you explain what AI is?
So AI, also we call the artificial intelligence. So this is a kind of branch of the computer, science and focus on the developing and the computer program, basically, so which can think or behavior, with the human level intelligence. So that's the kind of how we defined, the AI or the artificial intelligence. So AI actually is, right now, it's everywhere. And so, for example, I think, we all have this kind of experience. So if we go to the Amazon and the YouTube to watch the videos, and so you will see the apps can really knows, what you like and put the kind of content you like to see, and so in front of you. So that was amazing, how these kind of apps can do these kind of things. So actually, yes, they are using the AI models to predict your behaviors.
Right.
And also other examples, for example, you are using your cell phone, iPhone or Android phone, you're using the, voice assistant, these kind of functions. So you will find actually they are very clever, right? So they can identify your voice and know what you want to do. So how this kind of app can do these kind of things, so, accurately. And so it's because they also include the AI models in their apps. So that's the kind of, so the AI, how it impact this kind of daily life at this moment.
So we have these applications in our daily life, but there are really also applications that are in the medical space, which we are going to talk about today. But one of the strengths of AI is that it allows us to process lots of data in a very short period of time. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so this is the great question. So actually, so if you look at the AI, actually right now, it's a very popular and super hot topic. But actually, so it's not that kind of new idea. So AI concept that was initially introduced actually decades ago, but their application was hugely limited by the computational power at that moment.
By the ability for the computers to do what they needed to do because of the technology
Was not there.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So, but now actually, so with the advancement of this kind of computer technology, basically is, we focus on the two things, hardware and software, right? So they are so powerful now. And also the other kind of component is the AIs depend on is the big existing data set. Because they try to training their intelligence, the program is based on this kind of data set. So now we're entering into this kind of digital era. So yes, now become possible. So with the supercomputing, the power computer is so powerful, and also the data is everywhere. Why data is everywhere? Because we have the internet. So the internet is a great platform and a vehicle to generate this kind of content in the data. And also it's a great platform to distribute all these kind of AI applications. So that's why it's the time, the AI can really introduce to the daily life.
Right.
And also we have basically, a lot of successful story already. So one of the things actually we're looking at, for example, because, the AI itself is a very broad, actually, the discipline. And you have a multiple way can achieve the AI. So one of the way try to achieve that is we call it machine learning. So machine learning basically is try to build an intelligence program, and it's basically by allowing this kind of program try to learn from the data set, existing data set, all the self-generated data sets. And for a very complex problem, for example, you're trying to drive a car automatically or recognizing, very, complex pattern, for example, just recognize somebody from the pictures, for example.
Right. The facial recognition in our phones, right.
In the phones, So for those kind of applications, AI has achieved such kind of, very promising results. Yeah, so that's why, for example, these kind of things can apply to the healthcare. For example, people already try to use in this kind of machine learning, approach, try to analyze the CT or MR images.
Right.
Several groups already try to use this kind of approach, try to, to develop this kind of diagnostic tools and to look at the pathology, for example, in the diabetes or the cardiovascular disease.
Right.
And for our lab, so yes, so we also try to use this, machine learning, these kind of powerful tools, and combine with, the traditional approach. For example, in our lab, we're using the multi-scale biomechanics modeling, try to study the musculoskeletal disease.
Right. So the AI is only as good as the data set that goes into it, correct? So what you're saying is that because now we have this tremendous amount of data, now we are able to utilize AI in a way that we haven't been able to do before, because whether it's data around our shopping behaviors on Amazon, and Amazon can serve up to us something that we might be interested in shopping for that we didn't even know we wanted or needed. But also on the medical side, there's also a tremendous amount of data being generated there in terms of data around different health issues. You mentioned MRI and CT scan, as far as X-ray imaging and those kind of things that allow us to utilize AI in the medical space.
Exactly. So one thing actually, so we're looking at it here, is there any kind of, the data available, and also those data can be used. And so in the meantime, do we have the computational power to analyze those kind of, process those kind of data? So that's why, at this moment, those two components looks like it's available now. So yeah, so the AI research or the AI applications become, exponentially, grows during the past couple of years, and
Right.
we're envisioning actually for the, next decade, the coming decade. I think the AI could, reach out to, a lot of different kind of aspect of the daily life, and also we expect so the AI and with this kind of powerful actually the tools, and so they're gonna have very beneficial change for the the healthcare and
Right.
the research and the practice.
Right, because we're gonna hit a place where we have computers and technology reaching a level that they just simply haven't been at before. So in your lab, you're using AI, but you are a bioengineer, which we'll talk about that in a moment. But you are looking at TMJ. So can you just talk to us about what TMJ, or this temporomandibular joint, is, and why it's important to you to be studying it?
Yeah, so first actually how we get into study actually this very special joint. So so the major reason actually is because of the faculty in the dental school. And so this basically the joint actually is handled mostly is by the dentist. So the temporal mandibular joint, and simply we call it TMJ, is a very unique joint. So that's the only joint actually with the one piece of bone, but you have two joints on the left and right.
Oh, right.
And also they are providing the so critical function related to our daily life. So for example, when you eat, when you speak, and even time actually you want to laugh on something, so it's kind of facial expression, all you have to use these two joints, the temporal mandibular joints.
Right.
So unfortunately, actually, a lot of people actually, so they're trying to move their jaw not that easily. So for those people actually, so they have so-called temporal mandibular disorders. So temporal mandibular disorders are a group of musculoskeletal functional disorders, and it's related to the temporal mandibular joint. And so the people with these kind of problems, so estimated in the United States, we're about have 10 million to 15 million people have this kind of problem. And also the TMD also contribute to a large, actually, basically a group of people with a chronic pain disease. So that group actually is, have the huge impact on the economics. So probably annual cost that's around $500 to the $600 billion annual cost.
Right, because people experience a lot of pain when they have these disorders, and often are seeking out their dentists in order to get support for trying to figure out how to get relief.
Yes, because they impact these kind of routine daily functions.
Right.
So right now the challenge is, it's a very significant clinical problem. But unfortunately, so why it's causing this kind of problem? And in other words, the TMD etiology is not fully understand.
Right.
To a certain extent, it's poorly understand.
Right.
So that's why at this moment we don't have very targeted treatment approach to handle those kind of problems.
Right. So for a patient who has this issue, there may not be a lot of approaches for them in order to try to solve it or get relief, because, to your point, it's not very well understood.
Yeah, so the reason actually we're not, fully understand actually the disease mechanism. And right now the treatment is mostly non-targeted. And so, for example, we have the conservative treatment, including give the with the pain medications.
Right.
And some kind of time actually nerve block, joint nerve block, and also a little bit kind of rehabilitation, strategy. But it's only dealing with this kind of symptom, the pain, and also only offer the short-term symptom relief.
Right.
So, and also from the surgical treatment side, yes, so we do have the procedure called orthognathic surgery. Or the other kind of craniofacial surgery can treat those patients. But the problem is the long-term outcome, still very uncertain. And, many patients, they are still going to continue to have these kind of symptoms, in the long run. So right now, the needs is, in order to really develop this kind of targeted treatment and also have this kind of preventive kind of options. So we have to fully understand the disease mechanism.
Right.
And currently, actually, in our lab, we try to, focus on, identify the risk factors.
Right.
And also to understand what kind of mechanistic relationships, between those risk factors and the TMJ, the joint mechanical functions.
Right.
By understanding those kind of fundamental relationships, so we'll be able to develop target treatment strategies.
Right.
So that's the kind of things, we're doing. And the question here is how to identify those kind of risk factors.
Right.
And also how to understand these kind of risk factors, go through what kind of pathway to impact joint function. And also down the road, how can it impact the bioarches.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's a really great point. Shunshin, I want to turn to you for this one because I think you are a bioengineering student and you are looking at particularly at the machine learning side of this and the biomechanics of it. And I think that's really important is when you're looking at risk factors, you're also looking at the biomechanical risk factors. What are the structures within the jaw joints that may put someone more at risk? Can you talk a little bit about why being a bioengineer in looking at this issue is helpful?
Well, there are several aspects in here. The first thing is that we are as engineers, but we are not only doing the engineering part. So for engineers, we typically basically seek a solution for a problem. And we are also doing part of the science problem. We are also trying to figure out what is going on in this world, what is going on within this patient. So to solve this problem, it is necessary. So the first thing we are going to do is we talk with surgeons. We try to figure out what is going on in their observation, and we try to figure out what is the problem. So then we use engineering tools to try to target those problems. That is, the engineer skills is needed. And after that, we're going to use our engineering skills to really try to solve that problem. So although we are called engineers, but it's really a combination of science and engineering skills together to solve this problem. And engineering can help us design instrumentations. For example, how we can track the motion, how we can efficiently measure the electromyograph, those kind of key indicators. And it can also help us design solutions using our engineering skills.
So that's really interesting because when we think about an engineer, we think about things like buildings, we think about bridges, we think about these type of construction, at least I do. But when you think about bioengineering, it really is a little bit of the same thing because it's about the strength of the thing and how the thing operates in space and in the world in order to be efficient, I guess, is kind of how I think of it. And so when we look at a mechanism like the jaw as it works along with the rest of the skull, it's a little bit like the same questions you would ask about a bridge, I guess, maybe. Is it strong? Are there places where it's weak? How are those places that are weak increasing risk for things like pain or injury or, these type of things? So can you tell us a little bit about what are some of the features of the jaw that are maybe predisposing people to have pain? Have you discovered some things that seem like pretty unique risk factors in the jaw that can kind of indicate this?
Yes, of course. So I think I may want to start this with two interesting stories. So when we made the presentation at some conferences as well as the Scholars Day in MUSC, so we presented our work and someone came to us quite excited because either themselves or someone in their family has the feature we described, and that is basically people with small mandible, and people typically with the mandible shorter than the upper part, maxilla part, and typically women are more likely to get that. And very often people came to us saying, oh, I have someone in my family, or I am this type, and I do have TMD problem. So that's exciting moment that we have. So we identified, actually, what we find is multiple features. Just like I have already described 3, there are even more to describe. For example, the condyle size is also another factor. It is exactly because there are so many factors and each patient could have a unique combination that makes this thing so difficult to study.
Right.
That is also why we rely on machine learning to give us an answer, because it's pretty good to look at large volume of data and to try to look at very complex data to make a connection between things like a structure and the diagnosed result. So that is why we use this machine learning tool to study that. But briefly, the several factors that we identified, including the mandible size, people with small mandible are more disposed to, are more likely to get TMD.
And that's the mandible is the actual jaw itself.
Yeah, it's
right?
the jaw.
The jaw itself. Okay.
And also women are more likely to get TMD. So that is also that also matches the clinical observation results. And also people with small condyle is also another risk factor. Those are just the structural aspects. We are talking about a structure. There are also other reasons. For example, people have been talking about mental stress as well as trauma. Those are also could be problems as well.
Because sometimes we might grit our teeth or we hold stress in our jaw, which then may lead to inflammation or other things that might exacerbate the issue.
Yep, that's also one. That is what we call, that is also one of the non-structural aspects. It's about behavior. Well, things like the one you said, whether we grind our teeth during sleep or whether we like to eat hard food, those kind of things, those are all related. So again, this is pretty multifactorial. So that is why we start with the structure side, but actually we're expanding the structure side to other sides as well to include things like behavior or stress, the other components into this.
So that's really fantastic, because that means as a bioengineer, you're not just looking at the strength of the structure, but particularly as a biomedical engineer, you're looking at the strength of the structure also surrounded by the behavioral forces that might be impacting that joint, or in your case, the jawbone, but also, or the jaw joint, but also you could look at it in other skeletal features as well, I would guess.
Yep. So the same technique could be applied to other joints, but because fundamentally the joints are mechanical system. You have structure to fulfill a function. If the structure has problem in, either is originally or because of usage, you have problem in the structure, it will influence the function. So to recover the function, one of the best way is to figure out the problem in structure and try to fix that structure. That is why we start with the structure, and the structure is also related with how you use it. That's why, as you mentioned, the behavior is another important aspect of this thing. So structure and behavior and function, they are closely related concepts.
So that's a really great point too that you just hit on, and that I want to draw out, which is that the goal is really to look at how we treat what's happening at the source,
Right.
versus continuing with symptom management that might not get us very far. Dr. Yao, did you want to say something about that?
Yeah, so as Su mentioned, so this is the truly actually multifactorial the problem, and so we try to understand actually how those kind of first identify the risk factors, and also to understand how those kind of risk factors impact the joint mechanical function. As Su mentioned, this the structure, behavior, and function, this axis. So first, actually, so we did this machine learning, and we identify several risk factors, in terms of the structure. So the thing here is is this kind of, the machine learning-based work actually is great, so help us to systematically go through all the data set, right? Identify, these kind of, morphological risk factors. For example, the mandibular size, condyle size, and also ramus size. But behind that, actually, we want to understand what's the mechanism, how it impact the functions. So as bioengineers, so we have to understand and try to, to relate this kind of risk factor to the joint functions. So one of the approach we're doing right now, we try to integrate the machine learning and with the conventional so-called deterministic approach, the modeling. This is the focus on the biomechanics model. Right. So combine the machine learning with the mechanics model to build the relationship between the risk factor and the mechanical functions. So that makes the machine learning even more powerful,
right,
in these specific problems. And for example, so here we identify those risk factors from the machine learning, like mandible size. So we build the computational model to look at how this risk factor, for example, mandibular size and condyle size, can impact overall mechanical functions. Is that going to overload, generate big joint force, or generate big mechanical stress, and to overload the joints? And also down the road, this kind of big force and big mechanical stress can impact the biology to initiate the tissue remodeling and to damage the tissues. So those kind of things actually, so we through so-called multi-scale biomechanical modeling to combine the morphology, mechanical function, and the biology together. So you see this kind of multidisciplinary approach, right, really benefit actually these kind of, studies.
Right.
And if so here actually, so the point here is machine learning is very powerful. Without this kind of machine learning, these kind of powerful tools, we won't be able to systematically to identify these kind of structure risk factor.
Right.
But the machine learning itself also has some kind of limitations there, because they are really not going to help you to build, to tell you why this is a risk factor and what's the mechanical reasons and the biological reasons.
Right.
So by integrating with our multi-scale mechanical models, so use the output from the machine learning, and so we put it into the mechanics model. Now we understand how going to impact the mechanical functions,
right,
and how going to change the biology in the joint,
right,
and eventually going to lead to the disease pathways.
Would it be accurate to say that the machine learning helps you see where to focus, and then the other models that you have allow you to then investigate that focus, where you may take years to figure out what the focus should be without the support of the machine learning processing these sheer quantities of data that it can process?
Yeah, you just did the wonderful summary here. And so exactly. So without the machine learning, we won't be able to such quickly to systematically to identify the risk factor.
Right. Because the machine learning can't tell you
where is
this is the problem.
Need to be focused. Yeah.
It can say, here's some things based on your criteria that we think you should look at. This is what's rising to the top, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that actually really gives you the idea what do you need to focus. And they're very powerful. They're not going to missing anything.
Right.
So if we based on the traditional approach, for example, based on this kind of hypothesis-driven and approach, conventional approach, we could miss some kind of things. But machine learning is very systematic. They can identify all the risk factors one time,
right,
and overall.
Right.
So then we have the focused areas. So in other words, in the engineering part, we have the region of the interest. What do we need to be focused?
The region of interest, yeah.
So then we can study that
right,
and to understand the mechanism,
right,
biomechanical mechanisms,
right,
and mechanobiological mechanisms. So then we can answer the question, what exactly the cause and for this kind of disease or the disorders.
Right.
So then we can identify the target, how to restore the TMJ functions using the therapeutic strategies, either through the medication or through the rehabilitation or the surgical treatment, because we have the target now.
Right, which is such a incredible thing for the patient, because now we're able to make a more informed decision about what the treatment strategy should be, because these targets now have been identified, versus maybe going down a list of what we think might work and kind of hoping that something would work. This is where we get to the more the better possible outcomes by using machine learning and AI in patient care.
Yes, and also the machine learning can take care of these kind of the complex situation, because each patient is different.
Right.
And as Susan already mentioned, so when we look at this kind of structure, risk factor, there's all kind of possibility. For example, some patients only have one risk factor. Some people have two. Some people have three. Or could be the combination, all the different variations there.
Right.
So machine learning is so powerful. Yeah. So they learn the things from the collective data set.
Right.
But when they do the prediction, they can be the patient specific.
Right.
So they can identify for the specific patient what's the combination, what's the problem.
Right.
So it's very targeted.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the AI and the machine learning as a part of that. AI is the broad umbrella, machine learning and also deep learning fall under that. But let's talk about the data that goes into that funnel. So when we talk about data that the machine is working with in order to develop these regions of interest where it says, hey, here's a flag in the ground, you should maybe take a look at this. What kind of data is going into that system?
So for our machine learning model, we use a dental scan, the dental CT model. So that is our input. But that is not all. We need to process the CT in order for the model to use it, because AI is basically mathematical. So you can only put in things that could be represented by the mathematical entity. So what we actually did is from the CBCT, from the CT image, we can get the geometry of the skull, of the bone, and then we try to discretize them into matrices. So now we have a matrix. The matrix could represent geometry. So if it is 1 in the matrix, means there's a bone over there. If it's 0, there's no bone over there. Now we have a 3-dimensional matrix which represents the geometry. That is our input of the data.
So you're taking an image, a picture, and you have to make it mathematical in order to enter it into the system to be used.
Correct. So actually anything that goes into a machine learning model needs to be mathematical. So even for other disciplines, maybe like computer vision, that's also something mathematical. It doesn't see a picture, it sees a matrix, basically a bunch of numbers. That's what a machine learning could see, could understand.
Wow, that's fantastic. So you have the image, the mathematical image that you're putting it in, but you also are working with multidimensional data as well, right? So what does that mean? What kind of data is that as well?
Well, there are other things that could be used as input. So a very good example is the motion, because it's a joint. So it has movable part to be a joint, right?
It moves when it's a joint, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why we put the motion data, and we basically use that as another source of input. And people are all very interested in the muscles, because muscle is the actuator for the system. And one of the good indicators for the muscle activity would be the electromyograph, which is the weak electricity generated by the muscle when it generates force. So that is another example. And also clinical records and diagnosis results can also go into that, but maybe not always go into the input, but also go to the output as well. Basically, the machine learning model tries to build a connection between input and output. So we can put that information in the input, or we can say, well, it has this structure. And then we know from the clinical notes, this is a female subject with TMD. So it could be encoded in the input or encoded in the output. So that is basically an example of other factors we are considering, we are trying to integrate into this model.
And you're laying all of these data on top of each other, and rather than a team of people, 2, 3, 5, however many people, sifting through all of this data, we now have the power of the computer to be able to plug it all in there and really come quickly to some ideas about where we should be exploring and gaining new research discovery around this.
Correct. One of the problem with human looking at the data, which has been there for quite some time, the problem is that sometimes we're not quite good at looking at something. For example, complex structures. We're not so good at looking at 3D structures and try to summarize what is going on over there. And it became even harder when we do it on the computer screen because things were kind of distorted and scaled over there. But machine learning is different. It looks at mathematical entity. It looks at things. It could look at the big picture at the same time, and it could look at multiple data at the same time. Think about someone. If I can look at 2 or 3 at the same time, but 100, no, never. Mm-hmm. But machine learning could look at 100 very complex 3D geometry at the same time and try to find out the pattern and their connection with the diagnosis results.
And especially when talking about the multi-dimensional data set, we mentioned that you have the CT imaging, and you have the motion data, and you also have this electromyograph data, and we put together, have a look at it. And a human being probably doesn't have this kind of capacity, at the same time try to look at all those kind of different domain, this kind of data. But the machine learning, yes. So they can look at this kind of the data set from the different domains and these kind of different dimensions. And also we'll look at also the longitudinal data, not like one time spot. So we have different time spots.
Right.
So they can dig into this kind of data set and try to find the unique patterns. So this is probably the human being probably it's impossible to do that.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the kind of beauty to using the the machine learning. Yeah. So specifically in this project, and also this kind of approach can apply to the other kind of organ system and other kind of disease studies. Yes.
Right. Right. So, Dr. Yao, this project has been a tremendous collaboration across. It's a multidisciplinary collaboration. We have dental medicine, we have more traditional College of Medicine, we also have physical therapy and some of the health professions. Can you talk a little bit about what it has been like to have this collaboration and what the strength of that collaboration has meant for the outcomes that you're seeing in your lab?
Yeah, so as we discussed, actually, this is the truly multidisciplinary kind of approach studies. And so how make these kind of things happen, actually? So here, actually, I would like to emphasize the one thing. So we have this kind of platform and be able to group up people with the different expertise. So in this case, we have the dentist. Mm-hmm. We have the pain medicine people. Mm-hmm. And so we have the biologist to understand the joints, the biology. And of course, we have the bioengineer be able to assess the joint functions. How are we going to put a group of these people and work together and to address these kind of, very complex problems? Yet we do have this kind of a system to ensure the group people can work together. So here we have a very unique program. It's called Clemson University and Medical University Joint Bioengineering Program. So this is a program actually established in 2003. And so the mission for this program is try to encourage multidisciplinary translational research and educations. So we're focused on the research, and also we're focused on the training our next generation investigators. So within this group, the program, so we have a group of people, physician, biologist, and engineering, we're working together. And so in this case, engineers serve as a kind of, liaison. Mm-hmm. And so they try to interact with the physicians. So when we start the TMJ, we start with the physician, and we try to get the first input to define what's the clinical problems. Mm-hmm. And meantime, we reach out to the biologist, and to see, these kind of, mechanical function and the joint environment, how going to relate to the different biology down the road. And as a bioengineer, we can put all those kind of output from the physicians, from the biologists, and put it into our computational model and to simulate the whole joint systems, identify the risk factor, and also to elucidate the mechanisms. Based on that understanding and with this kind of knowledge, so now we go back to work with the physician again, so try to design new strategy for the treatment or for the preventions. So that's the kind of unique platform through the Clemson MUSC Joint Bioengineering Program to ensure we have the expertise, multidisciplinary expertise, and also the workforce and the investigator as well as the students in the program to work on this multidisciplinary project. So for example, we do have expertise, for the machine learning from engineering part, but we also have the clinical input to help us to identify to classify the data set with the diagnostic, outcomes. And also we work with the investigator from the College of Medicine, understand the biology. And also we work with the health professional and look at the different strategy for the rehabilitation through the physical therapies. So this is such kind of unique environment. We are the only probably the programs with the engineering bioengineering on the medical campus and work with the team like that.
Yeah.
So it's a very unique program.
Yeah. And I think your point about that it really is research that moves towards translational is a great one, because what you're doing in terms of learning about the jaw and the risk factors, a lot of that is through the process of the data. You're discovering things that we don't know yet about these joint systems. But it's towards an end of moving it to patient care and using that information to improve how we care for folks who are experiencing disorders in the jaw. And that's so important that we can make that connection and show that this is what research does, is it discovers the things that we don't know, so they can move towards improving care and prevention in the future.
Right. So as an engineer, we always try to translate all the discoveries, all the findings from the lab and to the bedside. So our ultimate goal is basically to treat the patients, or could develop a strategy to prevent this kind of disease. So we believe as an engineer, because as Susu mentioned, so engineer is the essence is to try to focus on the problem solving.
Right.
But problem solving, we also need understand the mechanisms. So this kind of problem solving strategy is based on well understand the disease mechanism. So that's why all the strategy we develop is very targeted and with very sound science as a backup.
Right. When we think about AI in this space, or just AI generally, really, I think you have some really great examples to talk about this as a tool. It is not a tool that takes precedent over anything else, but it is a tool that we can use to expand our learning and discovery, which of course is something that we really love to focus on here on Science Never Sleeps. So Dr. Yao, can you talk a little bit about AI as a tool?
Yeah, sure. And so AI actually, just like, other tools, so human being actually invented, over the years, and try to understand better about this world, and try to create the tools to develop the things really benefit the societies. So yeah, so look at the the artificial intelligence. So yeah, so they compare to the human intelligence, they do have a lot of advantages. For example, so the AI can really learn from very complex patterns, and they never get tired. If there are people to look at, they get tired and start to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So and also if you look at actually the other things actually over the years actually the human beings always try to create these kind of tools to benefit actually and make ourselves more powerful to observe the world. So give example. So our human being actually, so their vision capacity is limited, so they cannot see very very far away the things. So that's why they try to create some kind of the tools. Eventually they invent the telescope,
Right.
so they can see the stars and see the details. So just recently, so we put a very fancy the microscope on the lower orbit, so we can observe the far, far away the galaxies.
Right.
That's just the tools, but that tremendously increased the capacity for the human being to observe the things far, far away. And the same thing actually. So we also try to look at the things in the very, very detailed, very, very small scale, but so our eyes won't be able to do that very well. So that's why we come out the microscope. So it's very exciting things. Now we can see the little microorganism, right, like a microbe, the very clear details. So that kind of inventions helps in the medical research tremendously. The same thing here, and now we face new challenge. So we have such kind of fruitful data set and very complex patterns to identify, and could come from the CT, MR imaging, could come from the motion, and come from the electromyograph, all could be a combination. And how are we dealing with that? And human being probably, with their bare eyes, probably it's hard. We need new tools. So in this case, yes, the artificial intelligence specifically could be the machine learning tools as a great tool, just like a telescope or the microscope, help us to better to process those kind of data set, to get meaningful results. And so there's no surprise, I think, down the road, so the human being will create more tools to help us to better understand the world we're in at this moment.
I love that. I think it's a little bit like the AI is the microscope for the data scientist.
Yes, of course. So we can understand, consider actually AI like that. Yeah, it's a powerful tools. And also, we can ensure this powerful tool can be used appropriately. So that's why we have all those kind of different strategies to guarantee those kind of tools in the people's hands with a good cause.
So it feels a little silly to ask what is the future of AI, because it feels like the future is AI, but certainly there is a future to utilizing this tool. So what is the future of this in biomedicine?
So first, actually, for sure, AI is a very powerful tool, and also can make very significant change the way actually we're doing the biomedical research and also the healthcare practice. So no doubt. And we envision actually these kind of applications become more and more, and then with this kind of exponential growth. So one thing actually, so I would emphasize on that is we need to, notice actually, first how powerful these tools, and also need to understand any limitations in these tools. So that could help us to fully utilize and explore those kind of, the potential for these powerful tools. So one thing actually I'm thinking about, in the biomedical research, so the AI and, must, be combined with the traditional approach we are using at this moment. For example, how going to combine, with the we are doing the things, daily based with the, using the, benchtop, cell models, and also with the animal model studies and the clinical trials. So in that case, we can ensure this kind of, outcome from the AIs, and it's meaningful. and with the great mechanistic understandings. So this kind of output, when we go back to use for the patients, so we have fully understand the mechanism. So it's basically, so we're ensure this kind of outcome, so we use this appropriately. So the second part actually, so we're looking at is how going to increase this kind of, the application for the AI. As Su mentioned, so the AI is based on the data. So how we going to create this kind of mechanism to better to generate this data and share this data. Yes, we're in the digital era, right? So we have a lot of, the platform be able to generate the data and share the data, and also especially try to create a multidimensional data set. And the one thing I would emphasize and also be cautious is when we try to collect this data and store this data and use this data, we have to make sure we're doing this in a very safe ways. Because the tool is powerful, but we need to make sure the tools in the good people's hand and use appropriately. Mm-hmm. So that is what I'm thinking about. But overall, I envision the AI, and it will probably going to lead to a significant change in the biomedical research in the near future.
Yep. So totally with what Dr. Yao mentioned. So I think in the future, the thing that we really want to see is really large quantity of data and more diversity data. So we see all kinds of data could be used as input. As the biomedical engineering develops, we can gather more data, we can have more information about the patient. Those information can all go into the machine learning model and contribute to the healthcare.
Thank you so much for joining us on Science Never Sleeps.
It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having us.
We've been talking to Dr. Hai Yao and Shunshin Sun about TMJ and the use of AI to improve treatment and prevention. Have an idea for a future episode of Science Never Sleeps? Click on the link in the show notes to share with us. Science Never Sleeps is produced by the Office of the Vice President for Research at the Medical University of South Carolina. Special thanks to the Office of Instructional Technology for support on this episode.